Welcome to Movie Clerks. I'm Adam Christopher.
And I am Scooter.
And we are your hosts for this lovely endeavor. Just so you know, we are both cinephiles. We both love movies. We both love the analog process of renting movies. We stream movies. We watch them online. We read about them. We talk about them. We watch trailers. We argue about them. We go back and forth. Would you say that's a fair description, Scotty?
I think so.
Today we're talking WHEDON versus SNYDER. Scooter, you watched the Snyder Cut. What'd you think?
Well, I think I want some of my time back.
Do you get a time refund?
Here's what I will say about Zack Snyder's cut.
Okay.
Kudos to him for getting his vision done. Really respect the process and wanting to see his film come to fruition.
Okay.
What happened to him and his family is obviously very tragic, which is why Joss Whedon was called in to take over.
Let's clear it up. I mean, I know for the most part, most of the people who care at all about the difference between the Snyder Cut and the Joss Whedon cut already know. But just for those who don't, let's give the real quick summary of what happened with that movie.
So, Zack Snyder, this was the third movie of his Snyderverse, as they're now coining it. And unfortunately, his daughter committed suicide in the middle of it. So as I think any normal, rational person, he dropped everything and he went to tend to his family. And Warner Brothers obviously had roughly $300 million invested in that film. So you just can't not let that film not get completed. So they brought Joss Whedon in to finish it. I mean, he had success with Avengers and then obviously with Age of Ultron. So he's capable in the genre to do it.
Did he though?
And
did he have success
with Avengers?
Yeah,
absolutely.
You think?
Absolutely. Oh, totally.
I think that. So I guess I'm a little biased here because I went from being a huge Joss Whedon fan, from I said Buffy missed me. And I wasn't, for those who don't know, obviously he was the director of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, was a show on Warner Brothers, and he did, of course, the classic Firefly Serenity show on, that was
Leaf in the Wind.
Leaf in the Wind. And of course that got ruined by executives and all that kind of stuff. But now that we're looking back on some of that, I don't mean to sort of go sideways on it, but now that we're looking back on some of those Joss Whedon projects, hearing what we've heard about some of the turmoil on set for Justice League, it makes you wonder if things like Firefly and Buffy didn't end. Well, Buffy for sure not, right? Because that thing was a juggernaut, right? Like Buffy was like a $1 billion franchise or something, right?
Well, the thing with Buffy is that he's the creator. How many did he do? He didn't do all of them.
No, but he wrote most of them though, didn't he? Because at one time Joss Whedon was writing Buffy episodes, and he was also writing episodes for Dollhouse, I believe, and then also writing episodes for Angel, which is like a spin-off show. And all three shows, for the people who were fans of those shows, said that the episodes were solid. Like he didn't mail it in on any of those. So Buffy certainly, may have had problems, may have not had problems, whatever, but it was, super successful. But later, we heard stories allegedly from the Justice League set where, Joss may have been difficult to work with. So Snyder's daughter commits suicide. He's out of the project. They bring in Joss Whedon, who comes in, and more to the point about him doing the Avengers movies, the Age of Ultron and the first Avengers movies, is some people who were longtime fans of Joss Whedon noticed what we'll call slightly recycled material in both of those movies.
Well, and I'm not a purist. I'm not a comic book purist. I'm not a Joss Whedon purist. I come from a story background, essentially. So I look at it from just the structure of the film and whether or not the film worked from a story perspective. And I think I just rewatched it. I think it's extremely tight. And I think it's, whether the material is recycled or not, I can't say for sure, but I think it's a strong movie, which that the Marvel universe needed that first Avengers continue that drive to where we are today. So
it was important.
I think
it was a super important
it's
moment.
super important.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think in defending Joss Whedon, which is going to be my position on this show.
Yeah, it looks like you're heading that direction.
Yeah, no, and that's okay, because I I don't think you can blame Josh Whedon for the reason why his version of the Justice League sucked as bad as it sucked.
Well, I think to be fair to Joss, as fair as I can be to someone who I A, don't know, and B, have never met,
Sure.
you know, and C, also is like, you know, a multi-billionaire, so really probably doesn't give, you know, two shits what I think. Being as fair as I can to be to Joss Whedon, I will say that Avengers did what it was supposed to do. Age of Ultron did exactly what it was supposed to do. Highly polished, very fun to watch. And I rewatch, full disclosure, I rewatch the Avengers quite often. You know, it's one of the go-to, like, I'll just watch this movie or whatever. So any of the Avengers or any of the Marvels or anything like that. So, you know, from that perspective, right, very, very well done. But do you feel it was a mistake for DC to then go out and tap a Marvel director to do Justice League? Because to me, it felt it's just bad form, you know, because like DC and Marvel are supposed to sort of be two different things, two different IPs, two different stuff, and they have slowly but surely sort of approached this convergence point where they are, you know, we're getting close to the Marvel DC crossover at this point.
Well, we're going to get that with James Gunn and Suicide Squad 2, which is a whole another topic for another day. I agree with you in the fact that DC, I'm embarrassed for DC.
Well, and I think that, to be fair to Joss Whedon, DC is a weaker IP. It's just not as good. It's just not as a good IP.
I think the problem with, and this is where we'll talk business a little bit, which is, you know, growing, I didn't grow up with comic books, you know, I didn't grow up with that stuff. So my introduction to DC was really, you know, Batman, right? The old school Batman with Pal, Zip, and Zab, you know, with Adam West. Yeah. Absolutely. So I grew up with that. And then Burton, you know, Batman 89, right? Is that real introduction to it. And so I think the problem is DC has these legendary characters, and I think in modern times they just do not know what to do with them.
But and are they so legendary though? Let's talk about that for a minute. Can we just nail down, like, I mean, we'll get back to the whole, you know, Justice League versus Justice League, you know, Joss versus Snyder thing. You know, we'll definitely circle back to that. But while we're sort of in the weeds on this a little bit, let's compare just Marvel to DC just in general, right? Because I feel like DC just doesn't have anything to work with because their characters are born from a bygone era that just isn't a thing. You know, truth, justice in the American way does not feel this as good. It's not a feel-good sort of thing like it was for the people who were consuming it in the 50s. And let's just be real. It was for the majority population. You know, it didn't, you know, and that truth, justice, the American way, we're talking about a time in America when there's segregation, right? And there's Jim Crow and there's all this kind of stuff. And so you want to talk about, look at the difference between a character like Captain America and a character like Superman, right? Both those characters are sort of representations of what's supposed to be sort of American, you know, national ideals and pride. And, you know, telling the truth and sticking up for the little guy and, you know, making sure there's justice for everyone. But, you know, those characters for long periods of time turned a blind eye to, you know, injustices that didn't involve, you know, people that looked like them. Right. So, and, you know, not for nothing, but Superman was just, you know, something that was born so long ago that I think that it has its roots in irrelevancy.
Well, so, and I hear everything you're saying, and I think there's a level to that that's very factual and fair. I think when you compare DC, I think it's a DC v Marvel thing. And I think the thing is that DC, up until, you know, Marvel getting into the actual film business themselves, DC had always been the stronger of the company, so they never sold off their legendary characters, regardless of what their status is. You know, you've always known Batman, you've always known Superman, Wonder Woman, maybe Aquaman to a lesser degree, but you've always known those guys, and they've always been kind of in that DC house where Marvel, on the other hand, as a fledgling company, sold off their most important characters like Spider-Man and X-Men. So when they launched their film, they were hinging that entire thing on that lesser-known title, an Iron Man. And so I think because of the way Marvel's cinematic universe was set up, because it was this kind of these lesser-known characters, I think they had to adapt to the change in time. And I think they were better suited to be where they are today, where DC was kind of like, we've got these iconic characters. We don't need to change. Everybody knows who Batman is. Everybody knows who Superman is. Everybody knows those stories. And we can continue to do those stories, which is when you insert like a Tim Burton or a Zack Snyder into the mix. You started to get those more, grittier stories.
Well, and that's the key. I think you bring up right there is the key point, is that the reason, from my perspective, DC was the most successful and most dominant comic book franchise of characters for so long was because they stayed with their target audience, which was kids. They weren't ever meant to be held up to complicated plot lines and multiverses and, segregation and, changing boundaries and, cell phones and internet. And, it was just supposed to be, here comes a hero who saves the day. Right. And it was supposed to be fun and colorful and a little corny and whatever, because it was for kids. And Marvel, because it started later, their audience had already sort of turn that corner into like a more hardcore or hardened edge teenager. And so that's when you started seeing like Fantastic Four with real problems, like they couldn't pay their rent, or you started seeing things like Wolverine, who was just tearing people in half with these metal claws. It was violent, it was gritty, it was, it was more representatory of the world that people lived in. And, DC was still, riding high on Batman and Superman for sure, and stayed dominant for a long period of time. But ultimately, when you look at the transition that both franchises made to making films for people like you and me, and for the adult, watcher, Marvel just apparently translated better. It just did it. It was just a better set of things to translate into a modern time.
Well, the other thing is you had these, going back to the Burton films, right? Which I love. That's a gritty, dark Batman, and then you go from that to whatever Joel Schumacher was thinking with, Batman Forever.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because I feel like Joe Schumacher gets a bad rap. I feel like he gets unnecessarily hounded and unnecessarily bad rap, because the film he made, or the film that they put his name on that he made, was absolutely garbage. Let's just be real, right? It was trash. Yeah,
but totally.
His vision was take Batman back to where it was supposed to be for kids. Let's put neon lights. Let's put, let's make it kind of corny. Let's make Bane sort of scary, but not really scary. Let's make Ivy sort of over the top, and, let's have a George Clooney Batman that's, just sort of good looking and brooding, but, it's not really about, him doing action. It's about, it was more of, I think Schumacher was trying to get back to more of, Batman Adam West years. And
totally.
He obviously clearly missed the mark, but that's why it was terrible, is because and that was before, that's a period in time when movie studios learned the lesson of a consistent narrative with the same actors across large multiple movies. I think that's the world that Kevin Feige came from. I think that's the world where Kevin Feige grew up in, that world, and was like, this sucks, we have to do something different.
Well, the thing is that when you go from a Tim Burton to a Joel Schumacher, Tim Burton, I love his films, but he has a color palette of 4 colors, black and gray, and maybe white. And then you to your point, you put in Joel Schumacher, who's working in this kaleidoscope of colors, and you can't get any more jarring than you can from Batman Returns to Batman Forever. It's just, as stylistically, it is just ridiculous. And I think that's, to your point about, whether or not Kevin Feige actually did grow up, with that in mind, I don't know. But I think proper storytelling and seeing this broader scope, there was a realization at Marvel. It's like, listen, we got these characters that we're betting the farm on Iron Man. And so we have to create this world that is grounded in this, in this thing. And if we're going to create this, crazy universe, it's got to start from here. And that consistency really paid off for them.
Right. And I would contest that they didn't bet the farm on Iron Man. They bet the farm on Blade. So I think with Blade, they learned that they could take small, sort of relatively unknown characters and turn them into, major franchise hits. And then I think that's what gave them the confidence, to your point. That's what gave them the confidence to be like, hey, we could do this with Iron Man. Like, Iron Man can carry a film.
Sure. Well, Iron Man's a great character. I mean,
he wasn't, though. Let's be real. That comic book sucked because their imagination was so limited at the time on what a guy in an iron suit would look like and be able to do and how that all worked, right? And Marvel, I know everybody wants to hold Stan Lee up on this pedestal of like genius or whatever, but some of that stuff was so like thin in terms of, it's his bodyguard. It's not really Tony Stark, and just, blah, blah. Like some of that stuff just was not like that great. It was like a good starting point, right? Like we're like, okay, but we'll take it from here, right? Like and that's the example you get with Iron Man, right? Look at the difference between like Iron Man movie that we saw with Robert Downey Jr. and the first like 2 years of Iron Man comics. Right, in terms of like storyline and powers and stuff like that.
Well, I can't speak to the comics because I've never been exposed to it. It's never been my thing. I am completely cinematic based in my opinions.
You're not missing anything. Let me just put that out there. But
I think and this is there's going to be some comic book guy who's going to throw his shoe through his computer. But the comic books all, especially when DC and Marvel and the other guys are out in the business, they all have these characters that kind of pair up with each other. It's like, okay. So I think when you're sitting in a room at Marvel Studios, and I would agree with you, Blade really created the foundation that allowed for a lot of things to happen. And I think if you're sitting in that boardroom, you're like, okay, so Blade did well. What can we do that really kind of immerses us into where we would like to go? Iron Man is essentially Batman. Different backstory, but rich guy with toys is basically what he is. And so when you have that base of a character, right? Because Tony Stark in that very first Iron Man is not necessarily likable.
So here's the thing. Tony Stark is definitely the anti-hero, but I would disagree that Stark and Wayne have that much in common other than their enormous wealth, because Tony Stark is literally a genius, or has always been sort of billed as this genius industry, genius technology, genius of industry, whereas Bruce Wayne wasn't necessarily smart, but he was unhinged and determined and rich.
But then again, I think it kind of goes back to, and like I said, I'm speaking strictly from film.
And let's clarify for everyone. We will nearly always discuss things from the aspect of the cinematic canon universes of the respective characters. So we will always be disregarding anything that has come before it in print or after it in print, because we're it's a movie podcast, people. So
absolutely. But that's the point. So I think if you look back at a Bruce Wayne character throughout his cinematic representation, obviously Nolan, Christian Bale had, kind of that, he was kind of aloof, obviously went out to discover himself, came back and just kind of took over and had people that ran the business for him. He just kind of robbed the toy chest. The Forever and the Batman and Robin, the business was never really mentioned. And even in the Burton film, we do get, in Returns, we do get that moment with Bruce Wayne when he goes to meet Max Schreck, right? And he gets ultimately introduced to Catwoman before she gets thrown out the window. But those early movies don't really ever talk about him being in business. We get that moment where he's like, oh, rich people can be flighty, right? So it's one of those things where his character, to your point, kind of moving forward, has always been kind of like, oh, I'm just this guy who's going to go out and, do good and fight the wrong. Where to Iron Man, at least from his, the film opens up with him blasting a whole bunch of, mountains with rockets that he thinks is awesome. And then is plunged into the underbelly of the world that his war profiteering company has benefited from. So Tony Stark, at least from that perspective, has more depth than Batman ever has.
Well, and I think that's by design, because I think ultimately, obviously just looking at the cinematic representations of all these characters, Batman has had far more. There's only been one Iron Man in modern cinematic history, but there's been many Batmen in modern cinematic history, just like there's been many Spider-Men in modern cinematic history. So, we've had more opportunity to see other sides of Batman, but I think ultimately that character always comes back to the Batcave motif. The very secretive, kind of underground, doesn't talk about his personal life, doesn't get emotional, that kind of thing. Yeah. Whereas Tony Stark, I think, is built on the dude's an alcoholic, he's, egomaniac, he's a war profiteer, a warmonger. So that, I think it's a more interesting place to start from when you're talking about character building.
So we're going to take a side street real quick.
We're going to take many side streets. Rabbit hole.
Exactly. Exactly. So what is your opinion on the defunct, never going to see the light of day, Ben Affleck Batman movie?
I can't have an opinion because we never got to see it. I wanted to see it. I felt like it was going to be on par with if this makes any sense to the people who enjoy those films, to say it would have been a modern version of what Tim Burton did in the 80s, right?
I agree. I think it would have been amazing.
Right. It looked like it was going to have that. I liked the Ben Affleck Bat costume the most. I think it looked really good on screen. I think Ben Affleck was a phenomenal Bruce Wayne. I think that people who try to crap on him they're just that's just sort of the toxicity of the internet now. Like everyone's so super toxic about stuff. But he did a phenomenal job. He was, as good, if not better, as he was in Phantoms. So,
well, I think I agree with you. I think he would have been the perfect balance, because we really haven't had a really great balance of Batman and Bruce Wayne. Right. They've either been, very good Batman, Christian Bale, or really good Bruce Wayne, George Clooney, but not necessarily kind of both. And I think Ben would have been an amazing both, as we got to see in the Snyderverse of this conversation. But I think his storytelling would have been really, really interesting, because he is a very talented screenwriter.
Yeah, I don't know though. Zack Snyder bothers me a little bit with his overly he wanted to do, or at least allegedly, or however, who knows, right? Because neither of us know him, right? And we're not going to get a direct quote from him, but the idea that he wanted to do an all black and white Justice League, you're doing too much. You're going too far here. Like nobody wants to watch a black and white Justice League, homie.
Well, I think
it's not art school. This is not, you're not trying to win the Cannes Film Festival, my man. It's Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. Figure it out.
Well, I think getting back to the original topic, I think that's my biggest problem with his version of Justice League. Don't get me wrong. I liked what he did. I liked what he did. I didn't like the fact that he and Warner Brothers couldn't back the bus up hard enough over Joss Whedon, which I don't believe the version of Justice League that we got was completely Joss Whedon's fault. I believe that Warner Brothers and DC really monkeyed with the script before they gave it to him, because they were trying to, cut some stuff, trying to save some money. Because my argument about Joss Whedon is that I think he gets a pass on that movie, because you can't tell me that if he had that script that Zack Snyder presented as his own, with that ending of his version, you can't tell me that Joss Whedon wouldn't have done that, and we wouldn't have gotten that in his movie. It was totally an Avengers ending, which I'm not critiquing. I'm not saying it's a horrible thing, but it was totally in the mindset of an Avengers movie. And it feels like a rewrite over a 4-year period. You know, Zach got to see what didn't work in his movie and what Josh got crushed for. And then he took 4 years and $70 additional million to create what he, you know, presented as his version. And I think that's bogus. I just think it's unfair.
Let's get down to the topic at hand. First things first, which version was better? Who did it better? Whedon or Snyder?
Well, Snyder's going to get the pass because he had 2 extra hours.
No, for you, who did it better?
Oh, there's no question that Snyder's isn't more watchable.
Far and away,
no question.
Far and away
totally.
watchable. The Joss Whedon Justice League is unwatchable. It's literally unwatchable.
Oh, totally. Agreed. No, there's no question there. Absolutely. And that's part of the reason why I defend him so bad, because it's like he knows how to make a film. He absolutely knows. Josh's film to me feels like he went in. Maybe he's lazy. Maybe he's hard to deal with. Maybe all those things are true. But the dude knows how to make a film. He didn't just mail it in. He wasn't just cashing a check. You know, this is his name is going to be on this thing. And Hollywood is, you're only as good as your last film you've ever done. And so he knows that. So to really throw him under the bus and then bury the bus is unfair, because I just can't believe that. I can't believe that his hands weren't tied. I can't believe that.
I have evidence. I have supporting evidence to your point that Joss Whedon had his hands so bound and tied on this project that it was doomed to fail. And that evidence is this. Do you remember a movie called Toy Story?
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. And do you remember liking that movie?
Yeah.
Okay. Had Joss Whedon not rewrote the ending for that movie and significantly altered it, it would have been garbage.
Sure.
But he came in and he wrote a good portion of Toy Story.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah. And if you look at Buffy, if you look at Firefly, you look at Serenity, you look at Avengers 1 and 2, projects that he's been involved with, particularly either writing, directing, or both, have been done really well, right? And
Sure.
have hit the mark. So the fact
Absolutely.
that he came in and produced this unwatchable piece of garbage is just, you know, that he had kind of little to nothing to do with that. And it makes more sense when you think about people like him being sort of getting to the spot where he gets in there. Can you imagine being Joss Whedon on day one and you get the script for Justice League and you're like, so you guys are just remaking my Avengers movie? Is that what's happening?
But see, I don't believe any of that was. I don't believe anything that we saw that was added to the Zack Snyder cut. I don't believe any of that was in the original script.
You don't
Josh
think?
saw.
You don't think?
No.
You think it was that piece of crap that we saw that was the whole script?
Are you okay? First of all, are you telling me? Okay, so you're telling me that this we've both defended him, right, and his ability to make a cohesive film. Right.
And his ability to make a product. That's all we've talked about. But yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you're telling me that this guy that knows how to build it, he knows how to make it, he knows all the ingredients that goes into it, just magically goes in. It's like, it's good enough. I just don't buy it. I don't buy that anything in. I don't buy that anything in the. I don't buy anything with the Darkseid section.
Oh, Darkseid
was in the original. Yeah, Darkseid. I don't believe any of his stuff was in the film, in the script originally. I don't believe any of that was in there, because as much as, you know, as cutesy as the Flash pushing the truck out of harm's way and racing Superman was, right? You can't tell me that Josh Whedon thought that is a lot better than what we got with Zack Snyder's. There's just no way.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's hard to tell. And I know that people are going to go lose their minds a little bit and throw things at their whatever their listening device is, because there are people who claim to have different levels of direct knowledge on how much of the script was there and wasn't there and who did what and who said what and what was and all that. And I've had many people come to me and say, no, that's not right. You know, you don't know. This is what but like at the end of the day, like nobody really knows, because we're in a little bit of a Lucas effect where Lucas comes and tells us that like this is this pre-planned, trilogy that he's had forever, and then you start seeing evidence that like maybe not, like maybe it wasn't as planned as we were led to believe. So I think there's a lot of that going on with Justice League, right? You've got two pointless sides, and I say pointless because at the end of the day, Justice League is still basically unwatchable either version. It's unwatchable.
Oh, dude, totally agree. Totally agree. I mean, don't get me wrong. Steppenwolf looks amazing in the Zack. That's 4 years of advancement with special effects.
Right.
He drives me crazy. Because he's like, Cyborg was the hero, was the focus of the story. It's like he wasn't even the focus of the version you showed us.
Yeah, that's so true. Well, but again, like Cyborg is like a terrible character. Like the script wasn't good. Like he didn't have anything interesting to say or do. Like nobody cares about that character, and it's tacked on, and it just feels tacked on, right? Look at the difference between Wonder Woman had her own movie, right? Batman has had several movies of his own, so we're familiar enough, right? Cyborg, brand new, never been here. Even the Flash, you could talk WB with the Flash and at least establish that character, But Cyborg outside of Teen Titans, which has mostly been for like cartoon for kids, like not established.
And and this is what really pisses me off the most about the Snyder Cut is, don't get me wrong. Yay, thank you for giving me the Flash versus the girl crashing into the truck scene.
Okay.
Amazing. That was amazing. It was beautiful. It was awesome. It was great. It did nothing for the story. So you're going to give me that, but you're going to take away.
I will pause you there. I'll pause you there because it did nothing for the story, but who was that girl?
I have no idea.
Aha. See, now, have you ever watched The Flash on WB?
Nope.
Okay, I have. And I will tell you that actress who played that woman that he saved from the car looks suspiciously like the actress who plays the Flash's wife in the series. And they start out dating, and they're not, then they get married and all that. So I'm wondering if because there's a Flash movie coming, is there not?
Maybe. I don't know.
So I'm saying hold your judgment on that scene until you see the what may come afterwards content wise.
Well, but here's the thing, right? And this goes back to the ego. We're going to talk about Zack, my perception of Zack Snyder's ego for a second.
Okay. This will be interesting.
Is that he riled his fans up to demand his cut, which I applaud him for. Show me your vision. Cool. Right? And basically he gets them all riled up, and he's like, and he talks about Justice League 2, and he talks about the Snyderverse. And then basically at the end of it, he does the mic drop, done. Right. And so it's like, okay, so you knew you weren't going to do anything after that. Why are you spending money? Right. Why are you spending this money to put stuff into a film that does nothing to propel the film? It's like, that, and my thing about Flash,
he tried to save it.
Did he?
Yeah, he tried. He tried to save it. He did what he thought was best, and he wanted to save his project. He wanted to save the movie. I don't think he could. After he got over the incredible family tragedy that he had, or not over, you never get over it. You never get over it. You never move past that. You never get over that. But after he came to a place where he was able to start working again, I don't think that he could be comfortable with people saying that it was one of the worst movies they've ever seen. I think he tried to save it. He tried to come in and be like, see, now it's good. But unfortunately it wasn't good though. It just wasn't. Well,
that's the problem, right? That's the thing. It's like, dude, you had 4 years, right? You had 4 years to look at what the Joss Whedon travesty was.
Okay. But let's be fair. How out of, we're talking about the death of his daughter. So
sure.
Out of those 4 years, how hard is he really looking at what Joss did on Justice League? You know what I mean? Like, there's got to be 2 years in there or a year and a half in there where he's probably not looking at a whole lot.
I don't know. I can't speak to that. But what I can say is that he had an enormous amount. Here's the thing. and I've used this analogy talking to a friend. It feels like a guy that had all the answers to the test who still couldn't ace the test at the end.
That's 100% accurate. So I think our verdict. Let's find a verdict on Joss Whedon. Justice League versus Justice League verdict. I think has been rendered here today by your friendly movie clerks. Is that
save 6 hours?
Save yourself 6 hours because either way, it's like someone who had all the answers to the test and still failed.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to be it for this episode of Movie Clerks. You can find me on Twitter. I'm Bite-Sized AC. And Scotty, where can they find you? Take a drink, by the way. That's 1 drink for Scotty and 2 for Scooter. Man. So Scooter, where can they find you?
Woo. I am on Facebook, though it's not very active. But it's at I guess I'll have to be more active, but it's at Scott Waltner. So we'll get you some show notes for that.
Yeah, you're gonna have to make a Scooter or Scotty or something. You can't.
Yeah, we'll have to do something. We'll get back to that. We're gonna reframe that. I will create something fun.
We'll have time to do we'll have time to do sign off handles and stuff like that. So we don't have to.
But it'll be cool.
Yeah. And then also, we would like to invite you guys to join the conversation, the debate. Did we get it wrong? Did we get it right? Did you want to argue with us? Come over to our Discord and check it out. You can argue with me and Scotty or agree with us or maybe even be a guest on the show and be part of the next debate. So we look forward to seeing you. And until then, Scotty, take a drink, said Scotty. 2 drinks. I'm about to say Scooter, so take 2 drinks. Scooter, what are you looking at? What are you looking forward to watching this week?
Well, this week it is, Godzilla v. Kong.
Godzilla v. Kong. So next episode, we're going to come back. We are going to do our review of Godzilla v. Kong, just so everyone's aware. We said at the top of the show, we'll say at the bottom of the show. We are going to put the title of the thing that we are talking about in our show notes and in our title of our show. So you'll know what content we'll discuss before we discuss it, and we'll do it at the top of the show. But our disclaimer is thus. We do not care about spoilers, and we will spoil everything. So if you have not seen it, not heard about it, or don't want to know, skip the episode, because we do not do spoiler alerts, and we don't do non-spoiling. If you love movies like we love movies, then you've seen it and you want to talk about it. And so that's what we do here on Movie Clerks. We don't if you're a don't spoil it person, go somewhere else, because we're going to spoil it.
Or come back. Or they can come back after they've seen it. Yeah.
Come back after you've seen it. Please come back after you've seen it, for the love of God. Come back after you've seen it and listen to the show. But
we're not begging. We're not begging.
No, I'm begging. You don't have to beg, Scooter, but I'm going to beg. Please listen to the show. And if you want to be a part of the conversation, or if you want to tell us where we got it wrong, where we got it right, you can join us on our Discord or hit us up on our Twitter. Until next time, I'll be seeing you.